Hey everyone. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way YouTube will keep showing you more stories just like this one. Alright, let's get started. I've worked in different hospitals across the Midwest, but nothing ever shook me like my brief time at St. Helena Memorial, a small facility just outside of Dayton, Ohio. I was 26 then, fresh out of a larger city hospital where everything was fast, clinical, and sterile. St. Helena, by contrast, felt old. The building dated back to the 1950s, and while it had been updated with modern equipment, the long fluorescent-lit hallways, the squeaky tile floors, and the stale smell of disinfectant mixed with mildew gave it an atmosphere that was different from any place I had worked before. It wasn't supposed to be permanent, just a job to fill the gap until I found another position closer to the city. I figured I'd work the night shifts for a few months, stack some extra pay, and move on. My assignment was the Dementia and Alzheimer's unit, tucked away in the West Wing. The patients there rarely had visitors, and most were too far gone to hold conversations. Still, I liked it. They seemed to respond to me, maybe because I was one of the younger nurses, and I treated them with patience. I could make them laugh, sometimes even pull fragments of memory from their haze. But there was one patient who was different. Her name was Martha Calloway. She was 72, thin as a rail, with frail hands and wispy gray hair she always twisted into a bun. Martha never slept, at least not when I was on shift. Each time I checked in, she would be wide-eyed, sitting upright in bed, whispering things that made my skin crawl. "There's a man in the corner," she told me the very first night. Her finger trembled as she pointed to the darkened space near the wardrobe. "He just stands there, smiling. You can't see him. His teeth are so white." I forced a polite smile. Patients with dementia hallucinate all the time, I reminded myself. But even then, I couldn't shake the way she described him. That first night, she kept whispering until nearly dawn. A nurse on the previous shift warned me that Martha was restless, but nobody mentioned her obsession with the man in black. By my second week, I realized she brought him up every single night. Sometimes she claimed he was whispering her name. Sometimes she said he walked closer when the lights were off. And once, she told me, in a chillingly calm voice, he said, "You'll see him too." It was my third week when things escalated. I was working the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, running on barely any sleep. Around 2 a.m. I went to restock supplies in the linen closet. The closet was narrow, lined with shelves of sheets and gowns, and the overhead light buzzed faintly. I had just crouched down to grab a fresh pack of gloves when I felt it, a hand pressing firmly on my shoulder. I spun around instantly. Nobody was there. The closet was small enough that if someone had been inside, I would have seen them instantly. My pulse spiked, and for a few seconds I just stood frozen, staring at the empty space. I forced myself to laugh nervously, muttering, "Lack of sleep. Get a grip, Claire." But then, as I turned back toward the shelf, I caught movement through the small glass pane on the closet door. Someone was standing in the hallway. A tall figure, dressed entirely in black, was peering in at me. His face was pale, stretched into a grin that looked too wide, too deliberate. I screamed and stumbled backward. The figure instantly slipped out of sight. Within seconds, another nurse, Dana, rushed in asking what happened. My hands were trembling as I tried to explain, but when she opened the door, the hallway was empty. We searched up and down the corridor. Nothing. When we returned, Martha was awake, sitting up in bed, smiling faintly. "Did you see him?" she asked me. I felt my stomach drop. After that night, I begged the head nurse to move me to another ward. She said staff was short, and I'd have to stick it out. The following shifts grew unbearable. Martha whispered to me constantly, insisting the man was closer now, that he was watching me. Sometimes she'd mimic his grin, pulling her thin lips back to reveal her teeth until I begged her to stop. One night, while I was charting, I heard Martha screaming. I bolted to her room. She was pointing at the foot of her bed, shouting, "He's here. He's right there." Her roommate groaned and rolled over, clearly irritated, but I felt my entire body turn cold. Because at the exact moment she screamed, the motion sensor light in the hallway flicked on, like someone had just walked by. But nobody was there. I lasted only 2 more shifts. On my second to last night, around 3 a.m., I was alone in the staff lounge, pouring coffee, when the overhead lights flickered. A shadow passed across the frosted glass window of the lounge door. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. I froze, mug in hand. Slowly, I crept toward the door and peered out. The hall was empty, but when I glanced back inside, the reflection in the glass wasn't just my own. There was another face, right over my shoulder. A man's face, smiling. I dropped the mug and screamed. Dana came running again. But when I tried to explain, she gave me a look halfway between concern and pity. She checked the hall, checked the lounge, even offered to cover the rest of my break. But when I went back to Martha's room later, she whispered, "I told you he'd find you." The final straw came the next night. I had just finished rounds and was writing in a patient's chart when I noticed movement at the end of the corridor. The linen closet door was slowly opening on its own. I told myself it was just the draft. But when I walked closer, I heard it, whispering, low, guttural, like someone murmuring just under their breath. I stood frozen outside the door, the hair on my neck standing up. Then, from inside the dark closet, a pale hand pressed against the glass window. Slowly it dragged downward, leaving a faint streak. I ran. I abandoned the chart, my supplies, everything. I rushed to the supervisor's office and begged to be reassigned immediately. When she saw how pale I was, how badly my hands were shaking, she agreed to cut my shift short. That was the last time I ever set foot inside St. Helena. A few weeks later, I got a position at a hospital back in the city. Bright, modern, busy, everything St. Helena wasn't. But sometimes, when I'm walking the quiet hallways late at night, I still feel it. A weight on my shoulder, or the faintest echo of footsteps behind me. And every so often, I'll catch myself looking into the corners of a room, half expecting to see him there, the man in black, the one who smiled. 3 summers ago, my life almost ended in the most disturbing way imaginable. I live in Jacksonville, Florida, in a quiet little house with my husband Eric. Nothing ever really happened in our neighborhood, just the usual noises of lawnmowers, kids on bikes, and the occasional barking dog. But all of that normalcy was ripped away the day I contracted bacterial meningitis. At first, it was just the usual sick feeling I thought I could push through. A headache that wouldn't go away, nausea, weakness, and no appetite. I figured it was just exhaustion, or maybe a bad flu. But within 2 days, the symptoms escalated into something that didn't feel like any flu I'd ever had. The pain in my head was so sharp it felt like my skull itself was splitting open. I couldn't keep food down, and even water made me gag. But the worst part was when the hallucinations started. I was lying in bed one afternoon while Eric was at work, drenched in sweat and too weak to stand, when I heard it. A child's voice. "Mom." It came from downstairs. The sound was clear, innocent, and impossible. Eric and I don't have children. There weren't even kids living in the houses immediately next to us. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a neighbor's child outside. Maybe my fever was so high that I imagined it. But then a few minutes later, the voice came again, closer this time. "Mom?" I sat up too quickly, clutching my pounding head. My stomach lurched, but fear kept me moving. I stumbled out of bed and toward the stairs. My vision blurry, I called out Eric's name, even though I knew he wasn't home. Silence answered me. That silence pressed on me like a weight, and I slowly backed up into the bedroom. Every shadow seemed to stretch longer than it should. I closed the door and sat on the bed, trembling, convincing myself it was all in my head. But then I heard it again. "Hello." The word was whispered right at the bottom of the staircase. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called Eric, my voice breaking as I told him what I was hearing. He could tell I was terrified and left work immediately, rushing home to take me to the hospital. While I waited, I forced myself to change out of my sweat-soaked pajamas. My stomach churned violently, and I barely made it to the bathroom before I was heaving into the toilet. And that's when I heard it again. Another voice, not the child this time. Deeper, male. It came from just outside the bathroom door. I froze mid-vomit, gagging, clutching the edge of the sink. I didn't catch the words, but I heard the tone, low, almost conversational, like someone was speaking directly to me through the thin wood of the door. When I finally dared to open it, the hallway was empty. By the time Eric arrived, I was hysterical. He bundled me into the car, and we went straight to the ER. The doctors confirmed what I was too delirious to understand. I had bacterial meningitis. Untreated, it could lead to permanent brain damage or even death. The fact that I was hallucinating was unusual, but not unheard of. They started antibiotics through an IV, and within hours I was admitted for monitoring. I thought the nightmare would end there, but it was only beginning. That first night in the hospital, Eric stayed by my side until visiting hours ended. I begged him not to leave, but he had work the next morning, and the nurses promised to keep an eye on me. The room was dim, sterile, humming with the steady beep of the monitors. I drifted in and out of fevered sleep, sweating through the sheets. Somewhere between waking and dreaming, I saw him. My ex-husband, David. He was standing at the foot of my bed, hands clasped, looking down at me with that smug grin I remembered too well. In the dream, he spoke softly, almost kindly at first, telling me he was glad I was okay, that he had come as soon as he knew Eric had left. His hand brushed across my forehead, the way he used to when we were married. Then his voice grew darker. "He doesn't deserve you," David said. "You know that, don't you? Eric is weak. He'll never protect you. I should be the one here. I should be the one keeping you safe. I should kill him." The words slithered through me, jolting me awake. The room was dark again, the only light coming from the faint glow of the monitors. My heart hammered as I looked around. The chair beside my bed had been pulled forward, as if someone had sat in it recently. But there was no one there. I told myself it was the fever, just a dream, just delirium. But in the morning, when the nurse came in, I mentioned it. I said something about the strange dream of David being in the room. The nurse paused. "That wasn't a dream," she said softly. "Your cousin David came to visit you late last night." I froze. "I don't have a cousin named David," I whispered. Her face changed. Concern replaced her professional calm. She excused herself quickly and came back with the doctor, who assured me that the antibiotics could cause confusion and vivid dreams, but I wasn't convinced. Especially because David, the real David, lived 2 hours away, and I hadn't spoken to him in over a year. The second night was worse. Eric had gone home again, reluctant but exhausted. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I felt watched. At some point past midnight, I woke to the sound of breathing. Not mine, not the soft hum of the machines. This was heavier, slower, a man's breathing. I turned my head, and in the dim light, I thought I saw someone sitting in the chair again. David, only this time, his face was twisted into something cruel. His smile stretched too wide, his teeth bared, his eyes glinted in the darkness. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. "You don't look so good," he whispered. "Maybe Eric will join you soon." The lights flickered. The air in the room grew colder, and for a moment I swore his hand actually touched mine. I ripped my hand back, gasping. The monitors spiked. A nurse rushed in, flipping the lights on, and the chair was empty. The next day, I texted David. I don't know why. Maybe I needed answers. Maybe I needed to prove to myself it was just my mind breaking down. "How did you know I was in the hospital?" I typed with trembling fingers. His reply came minutes later. "I didn't." "What are you talking about?" I told him what the nurse said, how someone claiming to be my cousin David visited. I told him what I'd seen, what I'd heard. He wrote back, "You're imagining things. I never went there. Stop dragging me into your problems." But then, another text followed seconds later. "You must have heard things in your sleep. I would never threaten Eric." I hadn't mentioned the threats. My stomach dropped. My hands went cold. How did he know? The hallucinations, or whatever they were, didn't stop. Every night, as the antibiotics coursed through my veins, I saw him. Sometimes standing at the foot of the bed, sometimes whispering from the corner, sometimes leaning over me so close I could feel the warmth of his breath. "You belong to me," he hissed one night. Not him. Never him. The line between sleep and wake blurred until I couldn't tell which world was real anymore. The nurses told me my fever was breaking. The doctors said I was improving, but my mind told me otherwise. One night, I woke up to find the chair not only pulled forward, but turned toward the window, as if someone had been sitting there, staring out at the parking lot. The curtain was drawn back just enough for me to see my reflection in the glass, but there was another shape behind mine. A tall, dark figure, grinning. I screamed. Nurses ran in, but the chair was empty. By the end of the week, the infection had cleared. My body healed. But my mind, I'm not sure it ever did. I never told Eric the full extent of what I saw, what I heard. I didn't tell him about the text from David, or how sometimes at night I still feel the pressure of a hand on my forehead as I'm drifting to sleep. We moved houses the next year. I told Eric it was for work, for convenience. But really it was because the walls of that hospital room and the shadows that filled it still haunt me. Sometimes, late at night, I wake up to the faint sound of breathing. Or worse, A voice. Soft, childlike, from somewhere downstairs. "Mom." And every time I hear it, I wonder if it's really the illness that scarred me, or if something came back with me when I left that hospital. I met Heather on a dating app during the spring semester of my sophomore year. She wasn't like most of the girls I'd matched with. Her profile stood out immediately. Half her pictures were outdoors, climbing bridges, exploring rooftops, hiking at night. She had this wild, adventurous vibe that drew me in. One photo in particular caught my attention. She was standing on a rooftop, the night sky blazing with stars above her. The city lights spread like a sea of fire below. When I asked her about it, she told me it was taken at an old psychiatric hospital just outside of town. Millbrook Asylum, she typed. Totally abandoned, creepy as hell, but the view from the roof is insane. When she suggested we go there for our first date, I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. And for some stupid reason, maybe because she was gorgeous, maybe because I didn't want to seem like a coward, I said yes. Heather lived 20 minutes from me in northern Ohio, near a sprawl of farmland broken up by patches of thick forest. I picked her up just before midnight. She came out in ripped jeans and a leather jacket, her red hair catching the porch light. "You ready for this?" she asked with a mischievous grin. I nodded, trying to look braver than I felt. "Lead the way." The drive to Millbrook Asylum took half an hour, the road narrowing until we were surrounded on both sides by looming trees. At last, the cracked silhouette of the asylum appeared in the distance, a hulking brick building with boarded windows and towers that clawed at the sky. The air felt colder here, heavier. Heather told me to park on a side street hidden by overgrown bushes. We got out, the crunch of gravel sounding unnaturally loud in the stillness. "There's a way in through the basement," she said. "Follow me." We hopped a rusted barrier, jogged across the weed-choked lot, and slipped through a broken window half buried in dirt. Inside, the air reeked of mold and rust. Our flashlights cut thin tunnels through the darkness, illuminating peeling paint, collapsed furniture, and graffiti scrawled across walls. I tried to play it cool, but the silence pressed down on me. Every creak of floorboards, every drip of water, echoed like a gunshot. Heather seemed completely at ease, guiding me through narrow corridors and stairwells. "You've been here a lot?" I asked. She shrugged. "A couple of times. It's like my favorite spot. Creepy, yeah, but also kind of freeing." I wasn't sure how freeing a place like this could be, but I followed anyway. We made it to the second floor, where long hallways stretched into blackness. Doors hung crooked on their hinges, leading to rooms with overturned beds and smashed mirrors. The walls were tagged with spray-painted words. "Leave. Hell lives here. Run." Heather laughed when she saw me glance at them nervously. "Teenagers. Don't worry." But then, at the far end of the hall, something slammed. A door, hard enough to shake the walls. We both froze. "You said nobody else comes here?" I whispered. "Usually not," she replied, her voice lower now. The sound came again, a dragging, echoing noise, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. We hurried up another flight of stairs. Heather said the roof was safe, and from up there we could chill. My heart hammered as we climbed, but when we finally stepped out onto the rooftop, the night sky stretched vast and open. The view really was breathtaking, stars above, the town lights flickering in the distance. We sat on the ledge, our legs dangling over the side. For a few minutes, I almost forgot my fear. We laughed, talked about music, and about school. But then, from below, came a new sound. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing through the hollow building beneath us. Heather's smile faltered. "Okay, that's not great." I leaned over the edge, flashlight beams slicing down into the courtyard. Nothing, but the footsteps grew louder, closer, until they seemed to climb the stairs we had just used. "We need to move," Heather whispered. We ducked through another broken window back inside. The floor here was a patchwork of narrow wooden beams, stretching across what used to be a large auditorium. Below was a 10-foot drop into rubble and broken chairs. "Careful," Heather warned, stepping lightly across the planks. I followed, my legs trembling. Halfway across, a sound rose from below us. Breathing, slow, heavy breathing, just beneath the boards. I aimed my light down. A man stood there, or something that looked like a man. His skin was waxy pale, his eyes wide and gleaming in the beam. He wore a torn black jacket, his head shaved smooth. He tilted his head back, grinning at us with too many teeth. "Come down," he rasped, voice low and guttural. "Come down." I nearly slipped, my knees shaking. Heather grabbed my hand, yanking me forward. "Don't stop. Go." We scrambled across the last board and bolted into another hallway. Behind us, the man's footsteps thundered, faster than they should have been. Impossibly fast. We ran blindly, Heather leading the way through a maze of corridors. My lungs burned, my chest ached, but adrenaline pushed me on. Every slam of a distant door, every echoing footstep, convinced me he was just seconds behind us. We burst into the stairwell. The sound of pursuit grew louder, closer. Heather shoved me forward. "Basement window. Go." We raced down flight after flight, the air growing colder, the smell of damp earth rising. At the bottom, we sprinted through the basement hallway toward the broken window we had entered through. I scrambled out first, glass biting into my palms. Heather pushed from behind, but as she climbed through, she froze. I turned back. "What are you doing?" Her eyes were wide, fixed on the darkness behind her. He was there, just a few feet away. The pale man. The grin stretched wider than humanly possible now, his body convulsing like he was laughing without sound. "Come back," he whispered. "You can't leave." Heather screamed and shoved herself through the window. I grabbed her arms and pulled until she tumbled onto the grass beside me. We didn't stop running until we reached my car. When we finally locked the doors and sat gasping for breath, Heather's hands shook violently. "I've never seen him that close," she whispered. "What the hell was that?" I demanded. She shook her head. "People say Millbrook was shut down after patients went missing. Some think experiments happened there. Others say it's cursed ground. I thought it was just stories." But she trailed off, staring back at the looming silhouette of the asylum. I started the car, desperate to get away. We didn't speak the entire drive back. Heather and I stayed in touch for a while, but things were never the same after that night. Every time we talked, I could see the fear still lurking in her eyes. Eventually, the messages slowed, then stopped. But sometimes, late at night when I lie in bed, I hear it. That same slow, heavy breathing, as if he followed me out.